This is Journeys of Empowerment, a space where we slow down enough to notice what shifts. Where founders and leaders speak honestly about the turning points that changed how they see themselves, their work, and the impact they want to have. I'm your host, Michiel Soetjiet. Before we dive into today's conversation, I want to acknowledge our sponsor. Imagine this. You have rolled out the new process. The expectations are clear, and still adoption stalls. The behavior does not follow. Often, it's not the strategy that is missing. It's understanding what's actually reinforcing behavior in the day-to-day conversations between managers and the teams. Reinforcer.ai analyzes those everyday leadership conversations and show managers concretely what reinforced the right behavior, that missed the mark, and what to focus on next time. Built on proven behavioral science, it makes behavior change practical and measurable inside the flow of work. If you're curious what your daily feedback is truly reinforcing, you can explore Reinforcer.ai. And now, let us turn toward today's guest. When in your life are you holding tension because you think it matters more than it does? In this episode, I sat down with Minna Taylor, author of The Confident Body and performance coach, and someone who treats curiosity not as a personality trait, but as a disciplined path back to agency. She grew up on a farm in Southwest Virginia, an identical twin in a small, visible world shaped by religion and expectation. Known as the twins, watched, defined. Then came New York City and the conservatory training at NYU Tisch, where anonymity and radical expression cracked something open. Not rebellion for the sake of it, but experimentation, play, voice. We explored what it means to extract individuality from sameness, to move from over-efforting into surrender, and to understand confidence not as performance, but as the body free of unnecessary tension. We spoke about breath, voice, and a practice of yes and as a way of advancing life instead of defending against it. She named it bluntly: no one gives a shit. Get over yourself. This keeps returning. Confidence is not an archetype. It is presence without excess strain. If your voice has been tight, guarded, or overmanaged, maybe this conversation is a gentle permission to soften. Let's get into it.
And people, one of my favorite things is and it's so true. It's no one thinks about you as much as you think about you, or as much as you think other people are thinking about you. And so as a result, we construct these narratives, these deep embedded, potent narratives that somehow dictate our capacity or lack thereof to show up in critical spaces. And so we modify our performance and expression
because we think people care. Because
we want to meet the expectations. No one gives a shit. Get over yourself.
Welcome to Journeys of Empowerment. It was a little... I already pressed recording because I knew this is going to be interesting. So welcome to Journeys of Empowerment. I think this brief little introduction of yourself is already in and of itself a gift to the world.
Thank you, Michiel. Should I put on my headphones? How does this work?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
You can leave them off. A lot of people don't prefer to listen to themselves when they hear themselves to the microphone. I only am wearing... I don't like it. I don't either like it, but I started to be more okay after 64 episodes recorded and published.
Do you have an applause track?
Yes, I have one. But I'm always missing the one, so I'm always touching the wrong one. Yeah.
And it's
That's Minna, welcome to Journeys of Empowerment. It's an honor, it's a pleasure, and it will be an energized, I guess, and this is no pressure for me as host and no pressure for you as guest, but I do believe a roller coasting experience on steroids. Let's frame it in that way.
I do want to preface on the steroid topic. I started taking creatine and putting it in my protein.
Blame it on the creatine, right?
I was like, let me test the hype. And it's only been 3 days, but I feel like it's real.
But okay, we will get there. We will get there because I'm getting curious. Okay, what do you mean by it feels real? But all right, let me. I will pause and reflect and get back into my role.
Sorry, my
as host.
ADHD is just like.
No, I think we can shake hands also on that part.
Okay.
So we can diverge very fast. So we have to a little bit. No problem, mate. And I would love to invite you to first look a little bit and let us a little bit look through your lens, how you see the future by sharing your answer on the question, who do you aspire to become?
I don't know if I made this up or if there's a book called The Art of Becoming. There must be. Someone must have written that book. But I think that sort of notion of it being a craft is really important, as opposed to being a checklist of achievement or an archetypal model of what it looks like to have arrived. And when I think about who I wish to become, I don't see it as sort of an accumulation of milestones, of accolade, I think rather when I sort of seek to view myself in the process and craft of becoming, it really feels as though I want to become someone who is grounded, who feels at ease and expansive in my present state. I want to become someone whose attention is harnessed. I want both on self and others. When I think about who I want to become, I think it's not a deeper expression of myself, but a surrendering of self toward the deeper expression of sort of my human existence.
Wow. Oh, wow. I'm a little bit... I knew it.
Did that answer your question?
It always does, because
it's interesting. It's like a Rorschach test. It's like what comes out.
Never up to me. And it's the second principle in the podcast. Although it starts with me, ultimately it's not about me. And it is about you. And there's no right and wrong. But there is so much that we can unpack in and on itself that answer, that if we... journeys of empowerment ultimately is on the journey, sharing the journey which ultimately led to the path we are on right now, and why you're doing what you're doing, and who you are and who you are becoming. So as much as I would love to deep dive in the becoming part, I'm a little bit taken aback. I was like, oh, you have so many questions. I would love to go to which I only introduced at the previous episode, and that is sharing the Northern Star of our conversation, which hopefully helps us and guides us in our fast thinking, in our ADHD brain on steroids, to get back to, okay, but how can we help align, and you're perfect capable of, due to also your profession and your ambition and your passion, and but hopefully it helps the listener to understand, okay, where are we working and heading towards to. The Northern Star of a conversation we both agreed on is the curiosity as personal agency. Let's first unpack agency. What for you is in your heart the definition of agency?
I remember the first time somebody used the word agency, and I was teaching a workshop. This was probably like 15 years ago. And I was like, yeah, and I had no idea what it meant, so I had to like go and look it up. And then, now we're talking about agentic AI, and I'm like, oh, I can see the correlation. When I think about personal agency, we can think about it sort of very surface level as one's intrinsic capabilities, the ability to make decisions and act on one's behalf in service of one's desires. I think a deeper examination of agency requires a surrendering of attachment to concept of self and a deepening of relationship to one's intuitive knowing. Agency, I think, can be constructed around a falsified external expression of expectation, etc. How do I feel agency to navigate, the circumstances of the world that are outside of my control? And we can sort of think about, like, how do I do within this? And now it becomes sort of this I versus, me versus. And when we sort of deepen it into this sort of intuitive knowing or intuitive wisdom and deepening relationship with that, now it becomes a matter of how are we and how am I participating in this? Rather than what do I want, it's what is my active participation into sort of the collective movement of not what is outside of myself, for I am a part of that, but rather how are we all? Yeah, exactly.
So, and by that, is it a sort of where am I in the equation when it comes to interconnectedness?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I think where, and maybe this is an American perspective as well, this sort of individualism, the ego-oriented individualism, and I think it's sort of this collectivism that, at least in America West, we have completely disconnected from. And when, I think back to, when we were tribal, when we had to, work together in order to make anything happen, when we are a part of nature, really thinking about it from that perspective, we completely disconnected from that. But my agency is not my own. My agency is toward the benefit of. And that's where sort of the collective action comes in.
Makes me think about the book Drive from Daniel Pink.
I don't know. Oh!
And I never forget that for me that became very sort of instrumental in the approach of life and also my coaching business. It's centered around what is drive? What is intrinsic motivation? What is it? And there I discovered it's about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So are we, and for me, the whole concept of autonomy, so sort of my interpretation is the freedom of choice. The freedom of choice and the freedom of choice. And then mastery, for my interpretation, is becoming better and better in the things you find important. So freedom of choice to choose what you find important, what's important to you. And then the mastery, become better in applying that, or in what form of shape of whatsoever, and then working towards a purpose. And if those three are aligned, then we feel really, then we have a strong sense of intrinsic motivation and a drive. We do it because we recognize that we're part of a bigger, of humanity, of universe, or whatever what do you believe? Are we part of universe? What is your belief?
Well, first I want to respond to one thought I had, which is the notion of agency as it relates to purpose, because I think that's a really essential interconnectedness. I think agency in and of itself without a connection to purpose just is being. It's existing. Right? It's existing with awareness of self.
And it's human being and not human doing.
Exactly. So I think agency adds a sense of action and intent. And I think purpose is a great sort of place.
Northern Star.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so I like
for the greater good.
So I like that breakdown. Wait, what was your question? No, I diverted myself.
No, it's no problem. First, this is interesting what's happening now. And I'm sure if my audience is listening, and I won't mention names, but I know for sure a few in my inner circle friends are now laughing. Okay, these are interesting what's happening here. Two brains with the same sort of wiring are firing, and then all of a sudden. Yeah. We're talking about autonomy, mastering, purpose, and about agency and the interconnectedness with purpose. And my question was about universe versus humanity, and what and
what do I believe?
Yeah, what do you believe in?
It's an interesting question. It took me a long time to sort of negotiate what I believe, and I still struggle with the notion of belief because I don't know if I carry a strong faith in that way, and I potentially want to separate those two things. And I want to separate religious ideology also from the notion of belief. And I think that's important. Although I have a deep spiritual practice, I don't connect it to a religious ideology, especially something that exists in the realm of monotheism. Even though I was brought up in a monotheistic framework. When I think about what I believe in, going back to this idea of agency, going back to this idea of collectivism, universal consciousness, we can sort of shift into the space of we are all from the same matter, we are all born of stardust, right? Sort of thinking about it on this level. For me, now that then brings a sort of inevitable conclusion that although I don't believe in a higher power, I do believe in a greater energy or sort of a greater source. And so from a yogic perspective, we talk about this as the seat of consciousness. And although there's not sort of this Godhead, this anthropomorphic vision of this human man with a beard, right? Don't get me started on the white patriarchy and how that came to be. But I do think that I'm very, very connected to this notion of Eckhart Tolle talks about the knower and the watcher. And so already that begs the question of when I talk to myself, but who's listening? Yeah. Right? So who is, right? Well, who's listening to you talk to yourself? And then who is that? Who is the listener, right? The knower and the watcher. So there's that. But then ultimately, why does the thing that's listening, your consciousness, why does that then listen? What is the purpose of that listening? And so you can think about it, going back to this idea.
And who's the thinker?
And who's the thinker? And that's all just neurological capability, right? That is not even the most interesting question. I think the most interesting question is why have we evolved toward consciousness of thought, toward awareness of self, toward understanding of one's place and space in the universe, even understanding the notion of quantum theory, right? It's why?
But
right?
we think and we assume that we're conscious.
Yeah, correct. And so really, when I look at you, all you are is a reflection of light and atoms through my eye that my brain is interpreting as something substantive.
What do you see?
Right? Thank you for asking.
Thank you for asking.
I drew you a picture.
No.
But ultimately, it's meeting the seat of consciousness, which I have no connection to, but I am an extension of. And in that, now we can sort of separate self from experience, right? So now we move through the ego lens, but ultimately who's listening is not my ego. The ego is the thing through which I'm filtering my single, very narrow vision of reality.
Is the ego input or output?
Both. I think the practice becomes, how do we assess the filter? Output, because it will, do I sound okay? Do I sound smart? Do they like me? Do I flirt? Do I assert? Do I demand? Do I teach? Do I coax? Do I scold? Like all these things, right? We can start making these strategic, tactical decisions that are driven through ego, which is what do I want to achieve out of any given interaction, right? Also on the input, how am I receiving that? Do they like me? What was that tone about? Why aren't they looking at me? They paused too long, like all these things. So I think it's both.
Interesting. Hey, and circling back to curiosity as personal agency, if we look at, let's look at the here and now. With all the fuel inside of you, and that we're going to dive into. For sure, dear listeners. With all that drivenness, how are you applying curiosity as personal agency, and how and who are you helping to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm really leaning into curiosity right now. It's a very distinct practice that I'm implementing. I think curiosity in and of itself is a categorical understanding. It can also be activated intentionally, but I'm looking at it in a more sort of holistic, overarching intent. The modalities that I'm using to activate that: I read every morning. I write.
For me, I'm a Dutchie. Modalities, is that the same as models?
Modalities, meaning different practices, principles, approaches, techniques.
Sorry,
no, thank you. Always ask, yes. All my Dutch friends are like, one level down, Minna. One level down.
No, but it's no problem. I would love to. That's maybe the other thing to little briefly, and then we move on. But the thing is, that's why I love also the unpacking of the word agency, because we tend to say, "Oh, agency. Oh, yeah, I know some sort of." But if we ask, okay, but what is agency? I don't believe what is, because it's always a definition and an interpretation. So I tend to lean more to what is your definition of agency. And to get that perspective, and from the perspective, we have a lens. We can look through your eyes and then understand from your perspective what you are, bringing across, right? And it shapes the picture. So that's for me the reason, the modalities. And I'm like, Michiel, what is it models? It sounds like, but is it really?
No, and I really appreciate that. I think for two reasons. One, so much of what we do in today's world lacks curiosity and is based largely on assumption. And so even these words that we've heard and we're familiar with, we then assume meaning, or we assume that others have the same interpretation. Or definition.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to sort of be super clear about that. I also think even if we're operating off of the same definition, the sort of depth and intent of certain words have lost a level of currency.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately why I wrote my book on confidence, because we use these words like agency, like curiosity, like meaning, like purpose, because we know how to apply them in context, but don't give them the potency of their capacity to transform the understanding of a thought.
And a deeper meaning.
Yes.
Behind it.
Yeah, 100%.
All right.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. What am I curious about? How am I doing that?
Yes.
I remembered this time.
And I'm like, I have to know the star.
I got you. Yeah, reading, writing, a little bit of writing, and that's been a practice that's actually been hard for me to unpack. But I go on very long walks and sort of do rumination, sort of in movement, walking meditation, finding those like moments of download when my brain is soft and at ease and can really open up to sort of receiving those intuitive messages. And I've just found that I need to go more concrete. So I've started writing, meditation and exercise, just sort of activate mind, body, breath, spirit. And then really finding boredom. Yeah.
Finding boredom. How easy
boredom.
does that come for you?
Not
Not.
easy.
No.
I am coming off of 2 decades of hustle, grind, running a company in New York City with global reach, which I'm sure you can imagine took a lot of work and a lot of intent.
And a lot of boredom.
No. And so, but when I think about, I have this flash in my mind that comes back every now and then, where I grew up on a farm in Virginia, in Southwest Virginia. For those of you who are not from the United States, it's in what's called the Shenandoah Valley at the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I grew up on this beautiful farm. And would just spend, I grew up, I don't want to date myself, you'll appreciate this, pre-cell phone, pre-internet, pre-anything other than one's own thoughts, right? And sticks and leaves. And so I would spend hours. We had these 2 birch trees at the corner of our yard, and there was no one around. We had this multiple hundreds acres farm, so it's not like we had neighbors. And I would just lie between the birch trees and watch the leaves dance and the clouds float above. And I would do that for hours. And it like some of the best memories I have. Going into the forest behind our house, convinced that gnomes lived in the trees, and finding places where the gnomes lived. And I was like, that's it. That's where they live. Fairies. I was like into the whole thing. And so why boredom is something I want to invite, because I want to really find places to bring back not only childlike wonder. I think that is also sort of, in terms of, currency, I think that's sort of become overused to a certain degree, although I think it's very important. Really activate the imagination in new and unexpected ways. And I think in the process of drive, in the process of pursuit of seeking purpose, I continue to default in terms of neural pathways to what I have embedded for myself as the point of inquiry. And so I want to just really sort of leave myself open to what is something I haven't thought about. And I'm hoping that boredom breeds, I don't know, sparks of something.
When you were lying there in looking at the clouds and everything, and it doesn't sound like boredom.
I thank you for bringing that up, because
why
let's go back to boredom. Let's go
Yeah.
back to defining boredom.
Yeah, because otherwise people get sort of like boredom. Yeah, but nobody loves boredom, right? So why should we be bored? So
yeah,
and it doesn't sound like boredom, so that popped up in my mind.
I think when we think about boredom, we connect it with some level of angst or dread. Nothing to do.
Now my life is over.
Correct. Oh, so boring. I think we can look at it as an opportunity. And I as you're sort of expressing this, I can maybe put it into the same category as meditation. When we first start meditating, whether we're very seasoned practitioner, whether a new practitioner, there's always that first moment. It's similar to running, right? It's like, I run, the first mile is shit, right? Your body's like, why are we doing this again? We talked about this, right? And I think.
And when do I find the runner rush, right? Where is it?
Correct. Usually around 5K is my body's like, all right, I give up. We're doing this. The similar to meditation, it's like the first 5 minutes, your mind is like, oh wait, oh wait, oh wait, oh wait. And then it feels like anxious, unsettling, maybe, not really sure to do. And then ultimately you can sort of fall into this nothingness that is in fact really rich with information, rich with silence, rich with just the presence of being. And so I think boredom is similar in this, right? We can look at it as the act of intentionally making oneself miserable, or We can look at it as the intentional act of doing nothing and potentially depriving oneself of the coping mechanisms that we have introduced for ourselves to keep ourselves
busyness,
in constant states of distraction.
So this works for you. And
we'll see. It's still in progress. But just like everything else, it's a you're talking journey of empowerment.
Yeah,
it's a journey.
It's a long journey. That it's a right away. Journey. We are a work in progress for the rest of our time. Sorry, not sorry. But what are you doing professionally? How are you how do you apply it professionally?
Yeah. I'll take it back to my book, and I'll take it back to my book specifically because I think it breaks down sort of the quality of the curiosity as it relates to agency, as it relates to knower watcher, as it relates to seat of consciousness, right? So my book is called The Confident Body, A Functional Approach to Unlocking Your Full Potential. And when I work with individuals or groups, or that I'm speaking somewhere, and so I do both training and speaking and coaching on confidence and play and speaking, storytelling. When we think about curiosity, it's not an idea, it's an action. The action is driven by behaviors. So similar, I'm gonna outline it as I talk about confidence in my book, because I think they're both sort of words that have a descriptor, but ultimately the question that I'm interested in are what are the behaviors behind the perception that allows us to give it that description. So confidence, for example, when we label someone confident, what are we actually seeing that gives us the impression of confidence? Right? So what we're seeing are bodies that are free of tension, bodies that are connected to deep and easy and effortless breathing, bodies that are expressive vocally, and bodies that are free to listen, respond, adapt, and express, which I can put into the landscape of play. And if those conditions are present, we will define someone as confident rather than trying to seek the outcome of confidence, which we tend to attach to an archetype that is expressive or extroverted or something that might be determined masculine or charismatic and feel inauthentic to us. So similarly, when we explore this notion of curiosity, we don't want to sort of think about how do I try to see something, what is there? We used to do this in acting class, and honestly, I hate these exercises, but it's like walk around the room and name things, anything other than what they are, you know? So it's like knife, spoon, bowl, blanket, marker, you know, like things like that.
But for you, it comes very easy because I had to really think, okay, but how am I going to name that differently? Other than the microphone, which I'm pointing at right now. And I'm like, that came really fast for you.
Yeah. Well, so here's now the practice, right? So it's like, not how do I try, like, okay, so the rule is, and call it something different. The behavior behind the practice of curiosity is one of, because I guarantee you, Michiel, actually, you tell me, right? I don't want to dictate this to you, but you tell me. In sort of that notion of like, okay, in my head, I'm going to do this game along with her. Did you notice that you arrested your breathing? Did you notice that your body sort of clenched up? Did you notice that your brain got tight because it was working really hard to do the thing right?
Yes.
Yes. So what happens when we are most at ease is when we are at play. When we are at play is when our imagination becomes open and expansive. When the process of curiosity, which is sort of an application of that imagination, what happens there is our bodies are now responding to that effort. So the cognitive flow becomes easier. What we typically default to is tension. And what that means is, how am I doing it versus how am I being within the pursuit of the doing? And now if we become functionally curious,
Functionally curious.
About that process. Am I breathing first? Then what do I see? Is my body at ease? Now what do I see? Is my voice feeling expressive? Now what can I say? These are the things that allow us to engage in the process and practice of curiosity, of speaking, of expressing, of connecting, of experiencing a sense of belonging, of embodied storytelling, all of these things. Now we can move into them with a greater sense of outcome that we ultimately seek without the tension or attachment to the outcome being what we think it should be.
That's interesting. For me, the first word that comes to mind is that we feel freer to be.
That's it.
Right?
Yeah, well, going back to this idea, like, get over yourself.
Yeah,
get over yourself. Because
how much of your life now these days is about play?
Oh. So I was talking to someone the other night, and they're like, "Oh yeah. Do you do improv?" And I was like, I trained in improv. I trained in applied play, and in my master's training, and I learned improv in undergrad. Then I was an improviser for a while in New York City, and I ran a whole company using applied play improv in skill building for corporations.
Improv is also very good for trauma.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, it's
treatment.
It's I think the most important tool to help us rediscover how to be more human, like fundamentally. But he sort of said to me, he was like, "Oh, do you do improv?" And like, I haven't done improv like practically in a long time, right? And it's traditional modality, and it's a skill. It's a real technique. It's like watching someone play the piano. If it's done well, technically well, it's
a craft.
You. Yeah, absolutely. It's a craft. So I told him, I said, no, I don't do improv anymore, but I like to think that I lead a yes and life. So one of the fundamental principles of improv is this notion of yes and.
Yes and.
And the way I break that down is acknowledge, elevate, advance. So if we want to think about it from a practical perspective, how do I... And by the way, you cannot yes and if you're not listening, if you're not present, if you're not ready to adapt and respond, be improvisational. You can't do it. It is the distinct act of creating a third space of imagination. So when I yes and, I'm like, okay, yes, I'm receiving what you're saying, now making that our shared reality, right? So I'm acknowledging what you've just put into this third space. I'm now going to elevate it by bringing it up a level. So I'm going to add my secret sauce. Then I'm going to advance it forward so that we are now co-creating this thing together.
It shared.
Yes, and hand it back to you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now I have a question before we move on. Is there also a no and? Would it work?
No.
Because the reason why I'm asking is we can say yes to everything, but that doesn't necessarily make sense. So could it be that there is a no and?
I'm going to distinguish that for you. Yes and does not mean agree.
Okay.
It means acknowledge.
That's an interesting distinction.
It's an important distinction.
Important, yeah.
Because if I'm in a moment of conflict, for example, and I'll put this into sort of work life so it can feel like it has a sort of practical application. If I'm in a presentation and someone is being super antagonistic or they're asking questions just to undermine my credibility as the presenter, right? Let's say. I can say no, but I can say no and, right? And likely ignite the disagreement.
Yeah.
Right?
And the tension.
Correct. Or I can yes and it in this way. And it doesn't have to be explicit yes and. No. I'm a huge fan of yes and, using it very explicitly in the context of a phrase, but you don't have to. There are ways to do it that use different language. I love that you were so invested in getting this right. What I'm going to recommend is you take notes, and then it sounds like we could have a really exciting deep dive about this later.
It's interesting how the brain works. Like trying to imagine how that conversation would ease the tension and move forward. Get over it.
Yeah, Michiel, I love that you were so invested. Can we table that for a second? And I'm just going to finish, and then we'll keep going.
Yes.
I've yes-anded you. I've acknowledged what you said, I've elevated it, and I've advanced it.
Thank you very much for acknowledging it. I do appreciate you being here. And let me pause and reflect, and I will think about it.
Yeah.
And in the meanwhile, let's move on.
Well done. 5 stars.
Oh. And the way you're working, so your book, is the book also a lens in the way you're working with and for and by your clients?
To a degree, I think so. It was a challenge in figuring out. I think the philosopher in me really wanted to go in deep. What does it mean? Because presence, when we're talking about presence, when we're talking about awareness of self, there's the metaphysical, philosophical, spiritual inquiry. And then there's the practical, technical, applied inquiry. So it became a really big challenge for me to figure out the balance of what that looks like. And in my book, what I ultimately do is I explore the philosophy and the theory and then apply it in what I've seen in my clients, how I've worked within workshop sessions, within private sessions. Because ultimately, I think it needs to feel tactical to people. I'll give you a great example. So I had this client when it comes to play, but also when it comes to sort of the process and practice of curiosity and confidence as behavior, perception based on behavior. He was leading this huge luxury hotel brand, and they were going, it was post-pandemic, going through an up brand. And so his job was to speak to the entire organization, to communicate this up brand. And so not only did we sort of design what that talk would look like, we then had to prepare him to actually say it out loud. And this man, handsome, charming, successful, down to earth, so kind. I mean, this guy, he would come to my little tiny shoebox of an apartment in Brooklyn for sessions. Like, he had no ego about it. I adore this man. Like, so nice.
Yes, and?
Could not get out of his own way.
Oh, wow.
He was so locked. He just had, when people talk about a fear of public speaking, that's you making it about you. That is your body responding to your brain's story that it
that's
matters
you
more
making
than it
it
does.
about. Sorry to interrupt you, but that's you. This is fundamental.
Yeah.
What you just said. It's you making it about you.
100%. Yeah. And it's not because you're like, I'm the best or I'm the most important.
No.
It's, I want to do a good job.
I want to come across as...
I want to make sure people receive the message. I want to make sure whatever, I feel deep reverence and responsibility for the position I'm in. Whatever it is, right? It doesn't have to be like, I hope everyone thinks that I'm amazing, right? It's not that.
No. It can be more nuanced.
It can be more nuanced, absolutely. And I think his was the latter, which is I feel like these people are counting on me after such a tumultuous period. It was hospitality.
And he needed to get buy-in also because up brand, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and?
Yeah, this was an organization known for their exceptional hospitality in terms of how they create a relationship with guests. So to your point, absolutely essential that everyone was on board, from the housekeepers to the concierge. So he couldn't get out of his own way. And so we tried breathing techniques, we tried different play, we tried improv, and ultimately what worked for him... I was like, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. He was like, all right, lay it on me. I need you to get a mini trampoline. And he was like, okay. And I was like, and I need you to bring it into our next session. He was like, okay. So he got a mini trampoline, Which, first of all, you can't take yourself seriously when you're bouncing on a
No.
trampoline.
That's what you...
Second of all, your body cannot be tense while you're jumping on a trampoline. Third of all, your breath cannot be held when you're bouncing on a trampoline. And lastly, and most importantly, it is such a immediate reminder and awareness of your attachment to the words rather than your connection to the thought or intent behind the words. So it gave him permission to shake up the body, to feel a little bit silly. If you're not willing to look silly in front of people, you're not ready to lead. There's an inherent silliness and ridiculousness because you will fail, you will make mistakes, you will say the wrong thing, and you have to experience and fortify resilience about that, right? You're talking about journey to empowerment. I think that's a huge thing, and that's why I think also play is a fundamental practice in that, right? But in detaching himself from the script, he was now able to express himself freely and functionally in a way that moved him out of, here's what I need to say, very serious, very sort of stoic, right? And rather, how does my voice actually dance within my thoughts? How do I feel expressive and connected to what it is that I'm saying? How can I bring it to life in a way that feels both sincere and serious, right? And also possibility oriented, whatever it is, right? But those are all outside results. The inside is the permission to express freely outside of the constraint of fear that we feel when we make it about ourselves.
Do you believe, when I'm trying to grasp what you've just explained, and for me it makes sense, the play, and also the pre-mindset. So I have to go out and buy a mini trampoline.
Yeah.
I
this
didn't
woman
even
that
ask,
I paid way too much money for is asking me to buy
and then I have to, and then I have to bring it.
Correct.
Too. And then
to my luxury hotel.
You did it deliberately, because it's is somebody able to step over it and just do it, and then no questions asked, and then what I believe what happened, but correct me if I'm wrong, but what I believe that happened is it creates a sort of space between stimulus and response, between the thought and the action, and in that space, it's more about being, less about doing and acting.
Yep.
And coming across and everything what comes along.
Yeah. The way I talk about it in my book is don't try, allow. And I think it's very similar to how are you being within the process.
Allow
of
it to be and just
yep.
Let it be.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to be real clear that when we talk about allowing and when we talk about being, this is not about being passive.
No.
And I think this is a really important distinction.
Active, passive.
Well, energetically prepared.
Energetically prepared.
So
there's so much to unpack in this.
Well, in the vocal practice that I teach, there's the tendency to use the word relaxed. But relaxed, to me, if we're going to unpack terminology, indicates a level of disengagement. Where instead, if we're released, we have now freed ourselves of tension, but we remain in a state of readiness. So similar, if we go back to the notion of meditation, the great meditators, they can be in deep seat, right? They can be seated for an hour, and someone can come in ready to attack, and they will be immediately prepared. Right? Because we are in that state of present readiness, energetic activation. But we're not in a state of tension, right? And we're not in a state of disengagement.
And in between, we're open for the experience.
We're responsive. That's the play. So play, as I define it, is that intangible space of unpredictability and aliveness. And Esther Perel talks about this as well when she talks about eroticism. And it's that moment before we say yes or before we say no. It's on the precipice of decision. It's that moment of chaos before it settles back to equilibrium. And how can we be buoyant in that space rather than protective, defensive, or retractive? What does it mean to be alive in that kinetic space of uncertainty?
What is the outcome of retractive? Is that we withdraw?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, then I understand what retractive is.
Literally, so if we, again, putting it back in a sort of business context, if you see people sort of sitting and they have their arms kind of like whether they're crossed or whether the shoulders are just sort of like curved in, whether their chin is down, whether their eyes are up. We talk about
a little bit closed down.
That's it.
Closed off, closed down. I don't know.
Yeah. Patsy Rodenberg talks about this as the first circle of energetic activation. She's one of the foremost leading experts on voice. Also in Alexander technique, we talk about it as how do we understand the notion of posture versus posturing in terms of our gaze. So am I looking under the pole? Am I looking over the pole? Or am I looking through the pole? So am I sort of looking up, deferring status? Am I looking over, asserting status, looking down, right? Or am I looking through, finding sort of that equal status? Yeah, it's a really interesting thing to explore. Yeah, but again, it's all functional. So if we go back to this notion of curiosity, it now becomes this objective practice of deep, deep self-inquiry. So thinking about the knower and the watcher, I like to think about it as I have like this tiny little like alien robot who's inside my head, and he's just like, oh, I don't know why he's he, but he's like, hey, moving the levers of the arms, moving the levers of the tongue. Look at that person, beep, 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 boop, boop, and then it becomes so ridiculous. Because it's not, it's just so, and that doesn't mean I'm not aware of what's going on. That doesn't mean it's happening recklessly. It actually means that there's some sort of mechanism at play that's allowing me to operate within this landscape in this sort of, skin machine that I've been given. Right? It's so interesting. But right? But then you can actually think about it. So if I go back to this idea of body, breath, and voice, well, shit, my voice is resonant energy. So I can actually feel my voice. I can feel the placement of my voice. I can then also think about breath as the fuel for voice and movement and thought. Well, now I can become aware of my breath and the placement of breath, and I can do that immediately. Well, now I can become aware of how my body is allowing my breath and my voice to flow freely by having sort of this deep level of curiosity around the function and use of self. Non-personally, because it's not about me. The fact that my shoulders are tense when I go to speak has nothing to do with my intrinsic value. It is a habit developed over time because potentially when I was very early in my development, finding out how to speak about two people, create relationship, assert myself, express my thoughts, wants, feelings, and needs, I felt like I needed to overcompensate. And I've carried that with me, and I've embedded that into my behavior. What an interesting thing to get curious about, that I can actually make it easier on myself to navigate the challenge of life by doing less and ridding myself of the habits that have invited unnecessary tension that make it feel more challenging to operate in this world.
Yes, Minna. So, and now my favorite part.
Let's go.
Of our conversation.
Oh my gosh, yes?
We're going to make it about you from here on.
Okay.
This is interesting already. This is in and on itself. This first reaction is in and on itself already.
Can I get a refill?
And yeah, you can get it afterwards. And no more coffee for you.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, since Journeys of Empowerment is, of course, about also the journey, and we've talked briefly, although I tried to get to stay briefly, but you had such a beautiful answer on who do you aspire to become. Also, the central theme, the curiosity as personal agency, we elaborated very deeply, and I love that. But how does that align to if we look, pause and reflect? And although I love to believe that you were born with this gift, life isn't like that. So if we look back, if we pause and we reflect and we look back at your journey, what were the critical, let's say, inflection points, pivotal moments, breakthroughs, but also inflection points in your life, which ultimately led you to come all the way from the States and be here and in as a guest of, hopefully, we become the favorite #1 podcast in everybody's favorite list, #1.
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. You know how it works.
Share. I don't know.
Yeah.
What are the other?
Sharing
Embed on your website.
Sharing, yes. Embed on your website, and sharing is caring. So please do. If we pause and reflect, what are, let's say, the critical life events and the inflection points on your journey, which ultimately fueled you to care so much about curiosity as a personal agency? Where does that come from? Earliest.
Yeah. I think it's important to mention that I'm an identical twin. And although my twin sister and I look very much alike, we weren't the level of identical where we could, get away with swapping. We couldn't parent trap people, right? It wasn't like that. But we were always sort of clumped together. We were just called twins. And so I think it took a long time to sort of extract my individualism from this twin identity. So I think that's part of it. To even understand that was different. I spent a lot of time alone as a child also. I am still such an avid reader. I would just read for hours. I would, explore for hours. Again, pre-internet and pre-cell phone. I was brought up, I'll go back to this notion of monotheism. I was brought up in an Episcopal household. I went to an Episcopal private all-girls school. And I always felt a bit dissonant with that approach and philosophy. I think it had less to do with the religion and more to do with the powers that were imposing the religion and the way in which they chose to do that. Why I found that challenging is because I realized very early on that I have full disclosure, never had a fear of public speaking, never had a fear of taking up space. I'm not an outgoing person, but I am fine speaking up. And I think it was really interesting to, obviously this is in retrospect, observe the way authority met my lack of compliance toward behavior and behaving. And I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't sort of break rules in that way, but I was head of the ecology club, and I would make very emphatic announcements during assembly and let people know the correct processes and procedure for recycling effectively so that we could make sure that, we saved the trees. and like that. Even in grad school, I remember sort of speaking up and saying like, isn't this like the most efficient, effective way to do it? And then I had one of my professors sort of share with me that the woman, I was sort of her assistant, that she was getting a little bit irritated because I was a little bit indignant. And so I've always sort of found this tension with authority in that way. And I think a lot of that is because I was also brought up in a system that was very attached to rules, order, propriety, and linear traditional thinking. I, in the meantime, am reading about Buddhism, reading about paranormal, reading about cosmic life and understanding. And this is when I'm 12, 13, right? So very early on, I'm starting to think, okay, the way where my curiosity is piqued is out of alignment to the construct under which I'm being raised, and where I felt most sort of free is when I'm playing on my farm, and it's just sort of like all bets are off, no holds barred, just go and play. My favorite memories, my sisters and I would run across the field. We had this neighbor across the pasture from us. They had the farm next door, and we'd go there after school, and it was this old shack, no electricity, no running water, so they had a water pump outside where you get your water from the well, and then you had to go to the bathroom in the outhouse. And we'd drink Mountain Dew and drink cookies, and then go. They had this old barn where, if you don't know anything about farming, when you prep the land for the crop, shit'll come up, like, glass bottles and I grew up in a place where like the Civil War was fought, right? So, old glass bottles, old sort of artifacts would come up, and they would just store this shit in their barn. And so we go on treasure hunts in the barn and just like, kind of just make believe all day. We had a dress up costume chest, we would just do all these fun things. I remember even, all these memories are coming back to me right now. In church, we had the Christmas pageant that we would do. And one year I was given permission to direct the Christmas pageant. And I was like, God forbid I just do it this easy, straightforward way. I was like, listen, I love the three wise men. We're going to make them rappers. Because it's perfect. All of their lines had rhythmic text. They were all of the age, they were like, 13-year-old boys, 11, 12, 13-year-old boys. I was like, amazing. What a fun, modern approach to make the kids into, the story. And so we prepped it and rehearsed it, and they were all good. And then the grown-ups came in, and they were like, oh, no. And it's sort of this continuous diminishing of expression. And of course, there's two sides to this. One, right time, right place, is ego driving need to express and sort of hold space, take space, consume space. So that's obviously something that I think through wisdom and maturity is also a really important place to examine. The other piece of that is what expression was valid and interesting and fruitful that was muted. And when I then left the farm, I moved from the farm straight to New York City. So it was a very big difference. And
was it also deliberate moving away from that life and deliberately put yourself into an environment like crazy New York?
I don't know if it
was the rebellious. I hear sometimes a rebel in you. Does it sit well?
Shocking.
Okay.
I don't know if that's ever been intentional. I think it's more innate than something that feels
but there is
intentional
some
rebellion.
rebellious.
Oh yeah, I'm like naughty and a little dangerous, but like in a nice way. In a way that's like, oh my god,
am I still safe here? I'm getting a little bit surprised.
Everyone is safe. Everyone gets out okay, and we have a little story. But at some point, we're like, was this a good idea? It's like that. So no, it wasn't a rebellious decision. No. I went to school for acting, and NYU Tisch is the best acting school in the world. So that's just where I went. I make it sound so easy. Oh, I just went to Tisch, and it kind of was. Yeah, and so I went to New York, and I came from this place where in the town where I grew up, not only was I known as the twins, I, individual, known as plural, twins. Oh, you're one of the twins. We were also the daughters of the town ophthalmologist. So we were the doctor's daughters. And so there wasn't a ton of anonymity. We're like blonde, like so blonde. Like all the Dutchies can appreciate this, like so blonde, white hair, walking around, people knew us. We sort of had a visible family. Also, it's a small town. You make eye contact, you stop, you have a chat, you walk into a store, someone knows who you are. Like, it's like that. And so also it's like, don't say things too loud in places people might overhear you. Like that, right? Someone's always watching. So although I felt free to express, I also felt this awareness of being observed. When I came to New York, first of all, it took me a long time to like not make eye contact. With all the people walking down the street. Because everybody then thinks you're flirting, right? Or they're like, why the fuck are you making eye contact with me? Oh, wow. Just like don't invade my space. Yeah. Ooh. It did, however, when I was still like, I'm going to connect with everyone. So people who are from New York will appreciate this. Ethan Hawke is everywhere. Because he lives in New York. He's NYU is in the Village, and so it's like I think he lived in the West Village or Chelsea or something. So it's just like see Ethan Hawke, see Woody Allen, like walking around. So in that way, it was fun. But it's sort of after getting over these habits, it also gave me, once I settled into where I was, this idea of anonymity. And so coming from a place where I was so visible and observable, yeah. Exactly, I now move into this place where not only am I anonymous in this city construct, but I'm also actively encouraged in my training because NYU is a conservatory. So I was in class, 3 of 5 days a week. 2 days were actual school classes, like textbooks. 3 days a week were body, voice, play, scene work, improvisation, speech, all these 8-hour days, plus rehearsal, plus scene work. It's like very, very intensive program. But you're actively encouraged to get fucking weird. Try it out. See what happens. Really? Release your voice. What does that feel like? Move in weird ways. Say things in a way that you wouldn't say things otherwise, and then see what comes out and see what's possible in that place. And really playing around with this. Also practicing this idea of anonymity. So I would walk around the city practicing speech. So even to this day, I'm so hyper aware of sort of the phonetic mechanism. It was my spout. I geek out on it. It's math for the mouth. It's like ta 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 ta. How does my tongue move? How do my lips move? How do they all move together? How do my all the way? So I'd be like, yes, nice. Get rid of my sibilant S. Yes, nice. Peace, pace, this, that. Right. Walking around the streets. We would practice something called repetition, which is pulled from the Meisner technique, placed into the practical aesthetic technique, which is the technique under which I was trained with the Atlanta Theater Company. And we would practice our repetition scenes, which is essentially you're listening, I'm listening, you're listening, I'm listening, you're perplexed, I'm perplexed, you're perplexed, you're in agreement, you're in agreement, you're curious, you're curious, you're curious. So it's like just repeating back and forth what you see. Gets so dramatic, because we're 18 and we're in theater school and we'd be in Washington Square Park and we'd just be, doing these repetition scenes by the tree and like not giving a shit who was walking by, because it's New York, no one fucking cares. There's also a homeless person over there like banging on a drum dressed as a clown, like it's like literally nothing matters. And so I think it's sort of leaning in, like feeling so free, feeling finally like I had permission to kind of overcorrect into the space of expression, into this space of, not only anonymity, but like becoming agentic in that way, right? Who am I? What do I want? I think in the overcorrection, and we talked about this prior to getting on the mic, was in that overcorrection, sort of this arrogance of permission. And so I think I then had to, after, years and years of practice and inquiry and, leaving school, applying my work in various contexts, then returning back to the essence of the work ultimately, in that wisdom, realizing like, okay, the arrogance was in the effort and asserting self, and then the wisdom comes into like presence of self within the permission to express freely. And so I think that then became like a really long journey, but it all started sort of in the farm, the tension of like my innate being within the constraint of what was appropriate. And then
smaller community, smaller world,
and then
being
evolving,
observed. Now is my question. As we know, on the one hand, we have neuroplasticity. On the one hand, we can try and connect and create over time, by deliberate act, rewrite or reconnect neural pathways, right? On the other hand, we have the formative years, which are formative for a reason. So, in the formative years, towards discovering anonymous and autonomy and agency, if you will, how much do you experience freedom in you being you?
In the formative years.
Now, in the here and now.
Oh. I think this is why I'm so committed to my work. Because my work is the work. It's not my work. I didn't discover it, right? The work that I have felt the impact of, that I know works, and I'll get to sort of the outcome of the work in a moment to give you a direct answer. But knowing the impact of the work, Patanjali said, practice and all is coming, right? Yogic philosophy. The work, journey to empowerment, is a day-to-day disciplined practice. And the outcome of that consistency, practice can be arduous and uninspired. It does not have to feel self-ignited, right? It is about just sort of the discipline of it, right? And the mindfulness and presence of mind within the practice, of course. The freedom that I feel now to be me, complete freedom, because, and this will be a constant journey, right? But the freedom that I feel, why I feel the freedom, is not because I'm like, finally, I'm me, fuck everyone else, I'm me, it's like, again, like, it's not about me. It ain't about me. It's, the freedom is in full ownership and autonomy of self and full sort of welcoming, understanding, and appreciation of the world around, and sort of going back to this notion of collectivism and feeling that I can be free within the collective, that I feel so at ease in my body 99% of the time, that I feel connected and aware of my breathing and connected and aware of the breathing of others. Non-judgmentally, without story, without imposing context or sort of intent behind it. There is so much freedom in surrendering story. There is so much freedom for me in surrendering the try, the effort, the do energy. There is so much freedom in the surrender and allowance and being of the unfolding in real time. That is the space where the most powerful decisions are made in terms of neuroplasticity, right? That is a place where we can both become aware of our embedded neural pathways and stay open to the diversion toward new neural pathways. And there's so much freedom and creative potential in that space, right? That space, again, of kinetic aliveness, of unpredictability. And why I believe in the work is because the work is what got me to this place. Now, the work is body breath. The work is mindfulness, presence, listening, responding. For me, the work also includes, again, meditation, deep yoga practice. And the yoga practice is, again, just body, breath, mind. Like, it's all interconnected, but it's repetition of practice. And when people think that they can come and seek solution that speaks to the brain and bypasses the body,
it's impossible.
It's impossible. It's impossible. Even when we talk about Journey to Empowerment, you're talking about these books that you love. I love that you're also such an avid reader. Intellectualize it all you want. It's the internalization, yes. And the internalization is not one of, again, arrogance, which is part of the process, by the way, right? We see people early on in their process of self-discovery, and they're like, this is what I know, and like all these things, and it's like, you know it, you may not understand it.
It's arrogance because of ignorance.
100%. But I think we need to get there because we need to feel excited and confident and potentially overconfident in the way in which we're sort of attaching ourselves to these things, which gives us now permission to more deeply investigate. Hopefully, we then become such avid and disciplined practitioners that the inevitable process unfolds, which is one of moving from identifying with the knowledge to internalizing the knowledge to transmuting it into wisdom.
Since we're, for this conversation, heading towards a little bit to the end, I would love to share your perspective or your answer on the question, what would be... I'm still forming my question in my head, so this is the process.
I wish we had the Jeopardy music. It's like bing, 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 bing.
Here it comes. What is the desired shift within your clients you would love to see happening also on a, let's say, global humanity level?
Mm-hmm. I think about this a lot.
Uh-huh.
I think it's important to also understand that I am not a crusader of transforming systems. Mm-hmm. There are some systems that I don't agree with, that I feel in conflict with, that are dissonant to my value system, that I know in terms of agency I have absolutely zero influence over, right? So I'll just put that out there. There's a simple principle in voice work. Speaking should be as easy as breathing. So what happens there when I release my voice, the way that that can happen is in the softness and spaciousness of listening. Then when I go to produce voice that is an expression of a spark of thought attached to the inspiration from my inhale that I get from receiving my outside circumstance. Then the response, the way in which I move to express myself within, again, this third space of shared co-created reality, the spaciousness I feel then allows that response and contribution to feel aligned to not me, but we. So now if I think about on a global scale, how often do we see people jumping to respond? Mm-hmm. Thinking about what they say while other people are talking. Mm-hmm. Feeling defensive about their stance.
I'm never defensive.
Yeah. What do you mean? Stop. Are you talking about me? This interview's over. Right? Done. Operating in these places of reactionary communication, of distracted, self-identified assertion, of defensiveness, of wanting to be right, not understood. I have a colleague that talks about agreement versus understanding. And one leads to conflict, one leads to sort of a deepening of understanding of the complexity of our human experience.
Trying to understand.
Yeah. And so when I think about the world and what we can do to shift is, yes, of course, think before we speak. Yes, of course, all these things. But if speaking can be as easy as breathing, then really it becomes, again, if we sort of bring in the sense of internal curiosity toward personal agency, am I breathing while I'm listening? Am I breathing while I'm speaking? Am I breathing while feeling passionate about my point? Am I breathing while receiving vitriol from others? Am I breathing while taking in all of this, very complex geopolitical stuff that's going on right now? Are politicians doing that? Are they breathing? Are they listening? We're so fueled by this sense of righteousness. It becomes so divisive. There is inherent tension within that. And not the fun kind of tension. No. Not for, dramatic, intent, but tension that leads to violence. Tension that leads to unnecessary conflict. Exactly. And if we can do what we can in that sense of internal curiosity towards self-agency, limit the tension, physical tension, not narrative tension, physical tension with which we're showing up into these critical and consequential spaces. Now I can breathe. Now how I communicate, how I speak can be as easy. That doesn't mean disengaged.
Simple.
That doesn't mean relaxed. That doesn't mean unexpressive. That doesn't mean without adamance. How can that speaking feel as easy as breathing, as easy as my body that is free of tension? And I think if that now becomes because all we can do is what we can do. What is within our control? Again, looking at these global systems that I am completely disempowered to have any level of considerable impact toward. What can I do? Show up in intentional curiosity of self, the functionality of my skin machine as I move through this life. And if I show up in important spaces like that, with that mindset, with that mechanical intentionality, functional intentionality, now that depersonalizes it to enough of a degree that I can have a meaningful conversation in pursuit of creating this third space of understanding and co-creation.
Wow. Minna Taylor, thank you very much for being a guest. Like I said, as expected, it became, at least in my humble opinion, a crash course on steroids, powered by creatine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michiel. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening and for being present with this conversation. If something in this episode stayed with you, consider sharing it with someone who might need it right now. And if you choose to subscribe or leave a short review, you help these conversations reach others who are still reaching for clarity, direction, and alignment. If you're a founder sensing that your work no longer reflects who you are becoming, there's a room to pause, a grounded space to look at what energizes you, what drains you, and what may be ready to evolve. You can explore that at journeysofempowerment.com and see if it feels aligned. That's how the circle widens, quietly, one listener at a time. Keep going, keep becoming you.